Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's April 17th. It's a Friday, which means it is a Friday flashback edition of the show. And if you were with us last night on Twitch, we put this out for suggestion. And the people hanging out with us last night came up with a lot of good ones, honestly. But the one that we're going with this morning is Best American Soccer Manager in History. That can be national team, that can be MLS, that can be Old North American Soccer League, that can be whatever you want it to be. It is a very open-ended question, and we'll talk about some of the best managers in the history of soccer in the United States this morning. We're also going to hear from our friends up in Kennesaw at Burnt Hickory Brewery. That's going to be in hour number 1. And Mike Conti of 92.9 The Game will join us at 10 o'clock for his customary Friday segment. He is preparing whatever the tailgate at home thing is today, and I do not have any inside knowledge of it, but I know that it required starting yesterday.
Yeah, it's a 2-day thing, according to Mike.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued as to what Mike is coming up with for this, so we'll get some inside intel ahead of that show at 2 o'clock. We'll get that starting at 10 o'clock. But we got news and stuff to talk about as well. John, where do you want to start?
Well, do you want to start with the USL? Do you want to start with the the TV contract there, EFL players? Arsenal actually agreeing to pay cuts as opposed to deferrals. We have stuff.
I asked you to pick. I said, where do you want to start?
I'm just
you don't have to wait for the music to stop. Just
oh, no doubt.
One.
Okay. Well, 10 seconds later. Every football match in England will be live on TV until the end of the season. Every football match.
Every match.
Championship, League One, League Two.
Uh-huh. I thought there was another football league in England that is not part of this just yet.
Well, you'll have to blame the Daily Mail for a faulty headline. Every football match, live on TV until the end of the season. EFL Chairman Rick Perry confirms plans to end the Saturday 3 p.m. blackout with games to be played behind closed doors.
Okay, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff in this. The way they wrote this is very strange. Okay, so let me try to parse through all of that. Typically, you do not get to watch every League 2, League 1, and Championship match, period. They're just not on.
Nope.
They're not available.
Nope.
Okay, so now they will be.
Yes, in some manner, way, shape, or form.
Yes, because nobody can go to the stadium to watch it, so it only makes sense to make it available on TV. I could really care less about the blackout thing because, you're not going to black out something that you've blacked out the tickets. Duh. That's kind of a unnecessary point there. So, every game will be on TV in the lower divisions in England. If they do what? When are they planning on starting?
That is still in play, but they're looking to return to some kind of training May 6th.
Okay, so and if I remember right, I think the Premiership idea echoed this. May 6th was not when they were returning to team training. May 6th was when they were starting individual workouts at home with an idea to returning to team training in 2 weeks after that, later in the month, and then games in mid-June. That was what the Premier League had floated out earlier in the week.
So according to Rick Perry, the chairman of the EFL, plans are continuing to be worked up for all games to be broadcast either via our broadcast partners, iFollow, or equivalent club streaming services. We will update you on this once we know when matches will recommence.
Well, yeah, it's a gigantic duh. I mean, if you can't have fans in the stands, you have to make the games available for people to watch and listen to. So you're going to get rid of all that stuff. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, right now we don't know anything in terms of timing. So other than the Football League not being stupid and saying, no, you can't come to the game, and no, you can't watch it because we have rules. They have at least decided not to be that dumb. So you will be able to watch these games. If you would normally be in the building, you're not going to be in the building, but you'll be able to watch from home.
Yes. And according to our friends at the Daily Express, as a bit of a side note to that, EFL players won't be forced to play after the coronavirus crisis, as the return date has been set.
What?
Tony Banks from the Daily Express says that there will be extensive testing of all players and officials at all EFL clubs before June 6, with clubs readying their players to start training again May 16. But if players still do not feel safe about playing even after testing, they will not be forced to do so. The EFL will leave it up to each individual player to make his own decision.
Sure. I would assume that they won't be paid.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, just a guess. I'm not trying to be mean about it or anything, but if
you're not
opt out, somebody's got to be paid to play in that game, and these teams aren't going to have a whole lot of players under contract that once you get past June 30th, so you're going to have to figure something out.
A leading championship chief executive said in the Daily Express article, "We would not start again until we were absolutely sure it was safe to do so. We have absolute confidence in our medical staff, and we are told there will be extensive testing. Obviously, whatever we do will be guided by government directives. There may be a case that a player will still be worried, but we would have to talk to them individually in that case. Teams are likely to be quarantined in hotels once games start again to minimize the risk of further infection, but some lower league clubs with tighter budgets plan to travel on the day to even the longer distance matches to minimize the risk even further and cut costs."
We'll see how this goes. That does not sound like maybe the most well thought out plan, but we will see.
And it appears that Arsenal players have agreed to a 12.5% pay cut and not a deferral once Mikel Arteta had stepped into the discussion.
Okay. As we said, I think this is going to have to come club by club, team by team. It's not going to be something that leagues are going to be able to truly do.
Yeah. So it was a $25 million decision, basically, that came to the table. And so right now, it appears that Arsenal players, and these are the star players, they've agreed to this 12.5% pay cut, which was the number that had been floated for at least a week as to...
Well, hold on. I mean, of course the star players are going to have to agree to it, but everybody's going to have to agree to it. You're not going to cut one group of players more than anybody else. That's not going to fly. So, I mean, ideally, and this is what seems to have happened in every other case this has come up, the leaders at the team, which are generally star players or players who've been there for a long time, are the ones who are going to drive this and organize it and try to make it equitable for everybody. I mean, it's we've seen two different ways of doing this. Everybody takes the same percentage. It's just a flat percentage across the board that people are either withholding or deferring or just taking a pay cut, or it is players making, and this is usually at smaller clubs, players not making a certain amount are not affected, and ones making above that amount are affected at the same rate, which is not like just to get the star players or the highest earners, but to minimize like the effects on young pros or pros on low salaries.
Sammy Mockbell at the Daily Mail says players will get their losses back if they qualify, and this is what we talked about earlier in the week, if they qualify for next season's Champions League, plus a £100,000 bonus. The club are also offering players £500,000 each if they win the Champions League in 2021, or £100,000 each if they lift the Europa League trophy. That's
fine. That's a fair way to do it.
And the The 12% reduction will be for an entire year from April 20 to March of 2021. If they qualify for the Europa League, the percentage will be reduced to 7.5%. Sportsmail earlier in the week, manager Mikel Arteta held talks with his squad over the issue, and Arteta is said to have stressed to players the importance of doing their part to help Arsenal survive the financial storm. That was Mokbel's text in the article.
So the important part of this, the timing. What is the time frame of their pay cut? Go through that one more time.
It is March of 2020 April of 2020 to March of 2021.
So it's a year, and
yeah.
Most of these we've heard about have been for a month or I think it's been implied, it's been the rest of this season. This is a little bit different way of doing it, and in a lot of ways it makes more sense because it's less of an immediate hit, but it's spread out over the year. So instead of a 30% reduction for the next few months, it is spread out over a whole year, but it is a discount, but there's ways to earn some of that back. So that's actually a really well thought out way to do it. I like the way Arsenal structured this.
Kishan Vahela, also at the Daily Mail, the Premier League's so-called Big Six have banded together and will reject calls to agree a cutoff date for the current season, according to reports. Some clubs...
UEFA's got to, and if FIFA's got to get involved, they got to get involved. They've got to get on the same page. This is what we said a month ago. Now you've got it getting even worse. After UEFA, after FIFA made it clear that they were not going to hold to the old calendar and say that, well, the transfer window is going to start here or the UEFA competitions are going to start here. Now that they open the door, you've got Scotland, who... probably any time now the Premiership will call their season. Belgium has called their season. You're going to get more of that happen with some leagues, but now you've got the flip side with others. Get on the same page, because if you're not, transfer windows are going to be even more of a mess. Because let's look at this. So let's say Scotland and Belgium, both, they're the same thing. So the Premier League, they're able to get started with action again in mid-June. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Germany could be, almost done by the time the Premier League starts. And then Belgium and Scotland would not have played games since the beginning of March. And then they would start their next season, if everybody else finishes first and you try to get on some kind of a schedule, then they're not going to start their next season until October. Does that make any sense? This is ridiculous, because if they're not going to be on the same page, transfer windows are going to be an unmitigated mess. It's going to end up hurting the leagues that have called their season more than it's going to help them, because it doesn't help them. As we've said, there's going to be lawsuits in Scotland. I'm blown away that Partick Thistle has said they're not going to sue. I would. I absolutely would. If I'm a game in hand and 2 points back, and I'm getting relegated out of the second division, you can guarantee it. I have got Gary Martin Hayes on the phone ready to go, because that's ridiculous.
1-800-WIN-WIN-1.
He would win, because this is an easy case. He would win. It's ridiculous. And then you've got the nonsense in Spain where they're talking about, the standings, and yeah, sure, but we're going to put Atletico Madrid into the Champions League next year because they were in a final a few years ago. That doesn't make any sense either. This is what you're going to create more and more if you cannot get out in front of it, if you cannot get on the same page. These governing bodies have to do their jobs. And they can take the heat. They can have the fights. They can do that to prevent what could happen in Scotland. Partick Thistle's decided to stand down. Good on them. I wouldn't. Rangers isn't going to. They have far less of a leg to stand on, except for the whole thing, about a vote that was submitted that they missed, and then they published the results without the vote. Then the people who voted and already voted, but it wasn't counted, said, oh, wait a minute, our vote really means a lot more now. we're not going to take any calls, and we're going to really have to debate this. And who knows what that debate included or involved. It could have been money. It could have been pies. It could have been cows. Who knows? But then they voted, and they voted different than they originally voted, which that kind of makes you wonder. And all of that makes everybody look like they've got the big floppy shoes on and the rainbow wig and the clown makeup because it's a joke. And that is just part of the issue that's a joke, because the biggest part of it is if Scotland doesn't play games from the beginning of March until who knows when they decide to start the next season, or if they decide to do it this way after UEFA said, don't call your season, don't stop it, finish it out, and they're like, no, we're going to stop, we just feel like stopping. And then UEFA says, well, everybody else is going to finish, so you're not going to be allowed to start until this date. And you don't play for like 6-7 months. How genius is that? And then transfer windows and then all the other madness. There's so many other better ways to handle all this, and people are... I don't even know what the justification is. In Scotland, I know the prize money is part of it. That could have been handled very easily. As I've said, I think you could have very easily paid the minimum amount of prize money out for the division, paid it out, paid the rest out when it's finished. That would have crossed that bridge where teams need money right now. But the more that it is piecemeal in terms of how the season's going to finish, when it's going to finish, when the next season's going to start, that's going to affect the European competitions. That's going to affect the transfer window. And ultimately, we have to be real about this. The transfer window is where teams who are really in big financial trouble are going to be able to have an opportunity to get right. Period. You're not going to make as much money as you possibly could anywhere else other than the transfer window between now and then. If you are Aberdeen, for example, you have a player in Sam Cosgrove who has scored a whole bunch of goals, who could be, millions and millions of dollars. Maybe less millions than before, but millions. You're not going to find that... You okay over there, John?
Yeah.
You're breaking up and getting weird. You're not going to find that kind of money in a sponsorship. You're not going to find that kind of money anywhere other than selling those players. So that's got to be the number one goal here, is make sure you're in alignment. Because let's say UEFA says, okay, well, you finished your season and there's nothing we can really do to stop you and make you play. So your transfer window is open now, and it'll be open for a month, and nobody else is open. So have fun with that. And yeah, don't sell anybody because you can't. Or you could, and then you start the next season and you can't replace them because your transfer window is closed, and there you go.
The Big Six, according to The Sun in the Premier League, they have put up a united front, signal their desire to play the remaining games out in full. That would result, and this is the text of the article, in an amalgamation of clubs requiring just one other top-flight side to join them before they can put a block on the rest of the league's push for a definitive cutoff point. One of the club's greatest concerns is the issue of players whose contracts will end on June 30.
Yep, and that sucks. And this is the thing. You're not going to have a plan that solves everything. It's impossible. You will not have a way to avoid any kind of hiccups with any of this. You can't. But what would you rather do? Let's figure this out from a priority standpoint. What would you rather do? Call the season because you've got players, and in lower divisions it's far more. In the top flight it's not as many. You've got players who will be out of contract on June 30th, and that's going to be a lot of heartburn figuring out how to deal with it. Whether you're going to sign guys to short-term contracts, whether you're going to try to figure out a way to unilaterally extend it through the end of the season, whatever. That's not going to be pretty. But what's better? Doing that for the number of players that are involved, or calling your season early, not finishing it, opening up yourself to whatever kind of lawsuit, opening yourself up to whatever kind of TV money that has to go back to your TV partners, and making things very complicated when it comes to European qualification, which is another big pot of money. It's all about money, right? Money makes the world go round. Wu-Tang, cash rules everything around me. They nailed it. Well, why are you looking at short money in terms of players who are going to be out of contract at the end of the month, at the end of June, versus the larger money in terms of TV money, in terms of European qualification being smooth? Why are you getting hung up on the little money instead of the big money? That makes no sense. Zero cents.
Moreover, still from the Daily Mail, the report from the Sun claims the Big Six's resolve is being further reinforced by the prospect of total losses of £580 million if the season is canceled, which is more than the other 14 clubs put together.
You've got, for me, the number one. All right, the number two. The two issues, if we're going to get into the financials of it, and that's got to be a driver for what decision you make. In the top divisions that have big TV money contracts, your two main economic drivers that you can worry about right now, because you're not going to be able to worry about gate, TV and keeping what you've already earned or finishing out what you should have earned for this season, and the transfer window. That's it. Where else is the money going to come from? You might have some sponsorships that could be affected if you don't finish the season. You're going to have to give money back. That will be part of it. And that, again, it goes along the same thing as the TV, so you can lump it in there. It's the same issue. That's significant. As we said last night about Schalke in Germany, Schalke is, fingers crossed, they're going to get a TV payment on May 2nd. And if they don't, they might not have the money to operate. Schalke. Not a small club, Schalke. So get on the same page and get this thing done with at least. You're not going to be able to set dates in concrete right now, and that's understandable. But you can make a plan of, we are going to finish the season. If that means the next season starts in October, fine. If that means it starts in November, fine. If that means it starts in January, fine. We're going to finish this season. TV partners, we need your support here because we're going to finish the season. You are going to get the games that you have paid for or you are paying for. They might not be in the times we thought they would be. They won't be. But you are going to get those games. You're not going to get shortchanged on games. We need your support. We need your money now so we can continue to operate so you have a product next year. Period. But when you start talking about not delivering on the contracts that you've signed, even with this, horrible virus that nobody could have predicted back when these contracts were signed, you've got to try to do right by your partners because you need them right now. You've got to finish the season. There is nothing to be gained from calling the season, except for leagues saying they can award prize money. You can. Here's the thing I don't get. If you're on a board, if you're on the board of the SPFL, for example, we'll take Scotland because we've talked so much about it, and you've got bylaws that you operate under, right? You've got rules and regulations that you operate under, but you're the board. You can make changes to them. Honestly, obviously you made a proposal to do what you did, and it required a vote from everybody. If you're going to change the way that prize money is paid out, that's probably a board function. And I would think that you don't have to call the season and open up all the Pandora's box of stuff. And you could pass a resolution, pass a bylaw change in this temporary situation, or a rule or a regulation or whatever their setup is. And you could say, we are going to, because of this, unprecedented event, we are going to pay the minimum prize money out to everybody right now to help them stay afloat, and the rest will be determined when the season is completed. Done. That seems like an easier move than what they're doing. I don't understand why it is the Big Six in England. I'd like to know who their Big Six is considered these days, because it may be a little bit up for debate. But why they're the ones pushing to finish and the others are like, nah, I mean, there's got to be some, and we talked about the Premier League table, you're all the way down to 12 with a legitimate shot at the Champions League for next year. If you're one of those in 10th, 9th, and you're not part of the Big Six, wouldn't you want to finish the season?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wouldn't that be significant? And you put forward a proposal to your players. Hey, look, we're hurting right now. We're going to have to figure out a way to defer some payments. But if you qualify for Champions League, you'll get it back, and you'll get more back. Let's go do this. I mean, the logic or lack thereof right now is just baffling.
Okay. The Big Six and the Rebel Nine, according to the article in the Daily
15.
Mail.
What are the other five called? The Frantic Five?
The Middling Five? I don't know.
The Furious Five?
Probably. F5. Thursday night, it emerged that both Manchester clubs, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Tottenham, they're the ones who are trying to prevent the June 30 cutoff.
Okay. So then if we're going to go by Champions League money being an economic driver here, because it is, all right, I get it. For Leicester's perspective, they would want to call it now because they're not going to lose it. So, okay, that's one. That's the only one. If you're the others that are in that opportunity to win your way into a Champions League spot, wouldn't you want to play that out?
Well,
Unless
but
you just don't believe in your squad.
Well, but then you have Wolves and Sheffield United who are within shouting distance, and I'm guessing that they're they're also they're also banking on the idea that Manchester City could get bumped out because of their FFP violation.
Well, that you can't control that part, but you can control potentially winning in. You're saying what I'm saying. Like, yes, Wolves. Wolves is in what place?
Currently 6th, 2 points behind Manchester United. Sheffield United is even with Wolves at 43 points.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't they want the opportunity? For Sheffield United, it's transformational, potentially. Because
you're spending $2 for every one.
Yeah, and that doesn't work right now. So if you get in the Champions League, it could save your freaking club. Don't you want to play for that opportunity? I mean, you're already screwed financially as it is. Like, wouldn't you want to try to play for that opportunity to get into Europe and transform your club? Like, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense.
No. But, you're... it's just... It does not make sense on a bunch of different levels, but that not making sense hasn't... stop folks from trying to do business in a way that they think is beneficial in the past.
It's not about they think it's more beneficial. Like, they get their prize money now, I guess. I'm guessing that's the debate here, because I couldn't tell you what else it is. They would get the transfer window potentially opened up, but remember, it doesn't matter just about your window. It matters about what the other windows are. So, okay, you want if that's it. If it's like, well, we got to sell some players, so we need to be able to do that as fast as possible. It doesn't matter when your window's open. If you call the season, it matters what the others are going to do. If Germany's going to play to September, if the Dutch are not going to start playing again until September, if Spain's going to finish, if Italy's going to finish, but they're not going to start until July or who knows when, their window's not going to open up until much later. So, it makes no sense. And this is, again, where UEFA, FIFA have to take leadership positions and have to try to protect these people from being stupid, because obviously, their stupidity is running the risk of hurting their clubs. And you have to get as best as you can in this situation, which is not going to be completely and utterly possible across the board because countries are going to be on different timelines. But you've got to at least get some kind of continuity and consistency. between these leagues because it will affect the transfer window. It will affect European competition. It's vital. And if you've got everybody just, okay, it's time to fight it out, let's go get into the debate room. I mean, jeez.
And the other story that I was looking at, having to do with the Premier League before the one story that broke at the end of our Twitch session last night, from Matt Hughes. And Matt Hughes is becoming, if you're interested in what's going on overseas, a must follow on Twitter at Matt Hughes DM over at the Daily Mail. Matt has Premier League clubs worried about receiving installments of transfer fees worth more than £100 million due from European sides because of the collapse of TV deals on the continent. Sports mails learned that broadcasters in France, Spain, and Italy have all failed to make payments to their respective leagues over the last month, leading to fears clubs in those countries may be unable to pay fees due in June. The vast majority of fees are paid in installments over the entire period covered by a player's contract, particularly when it's a significant transfer, although selling clubs in need of instant cash occasionally arrange bridging loans at commercial rates secured against future payments to ensure they receive the money up front.
Yep, and that's the problem. You do a bridge loan, you don't get the money from a club that goes bust because they didn't get their TV payment. You know, you got money coming from Schalke. You hear Schalke say that they need money desperately by May or they're in big trouble of being out of money, and you're like, wait a minute, they owe us money. Crap, we're screwed. And we got to pay a loan payment. We're really screwed. That's the reality. I mean, there's nothing, and this is another one. Like, there's nothing that can be done about this directly because, you know, these Premier League clubs and clubs around the world are dealing. It's not just a Premier League thing, but if you are expecting, you know, transfer installments to be paid in the next, you know, couple of months, you might not get it. And you might not know when you're going to get it. And that's going to affect your bottom line because you planned on getting it. So that's out of your control. You've got to hope, and this goes back to the ultimate point here. You've got to hope that the TV partners and the leagues can find a common ground to work towards finishing the current season. And if you can guarantee that, and that's what I would do. I mean, for me, that's it, is you go to your TV partners if you are whatever league in the world, and you say, you paid for a season of X number of games, you are going to get that season of X number of games. The only thing we cannot guarantee you is when they are played, because that's out of our control. But you're going to get the games you paid for, flat out. And if you're going to do that, and if you commit to doing that, and don't do this wishy-washy nonsense of, well, we've got a vote, and we've got email votes, and blah, 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 nonsense, garbage. You've got to make that commitment to your TV partners, and then you've also got to ask, hey, we were banking on this money ahead of time. We know you guys are hurting too, but you're committed to pay it. Can you pay it, or at least part of it, now? Because our clubs have lost out on a lot of revenue, and to guarantee you a product, we need your support to do this now. That seems like a much more reasonable conversation than, yeah, we're not going to finish the season, but we don't want to give you money back. You know, how's that going to go over?
54 players with outstanding fees owed to Premier League clubs currently playing in France, Spain, and Italy. Manchester City owed fees on Dzeko, Nolito, and Danilo. Chelsea's waiting on payments for Costa, Cuadrado, and Bertrand Traore. Tottenham has £37 million tied up in fees that they're waiting for Trippier and Christian Eriksen.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes before you guys hear from Scott and Richard at Burnt Hickory Brewery up in Kennesaw. I'll talk soccer, talk beer. Maybe I have a plan to make a drive to Kennesaw this weekend to get some beer after our conversation, maybe, possibly. You'll get to hear why here in a bit. But what else do we have on the news front before that?
The one thing from our friends at Pro Soccer USA, Julia Poe, the United Soccer League, USL, will extend its training moratorium for both USL Championship and League One clubs through May the 3rd. The USL initially issued the training moratorium back in March with the idea that they could come back in May. But now the extension of the moratorium just follows in line what we saw from MLS. quoting Ryan Madden, spokesperson for USL, every day we're working to better understand the effects of COVID-19 on the 2020 USL Championship and League One seasons. While we were hoping that a return to play in May would be possible, we understand that's no longer feasible given the guidance we're receiving from local, state, and national health authorities. So training moratorium has been extended to May 3rd.
Yeah, nothing shocking there. And I don't think MLS has announced it yet, but they essentially will. I mean, they said June 6th is the first possible date for games. So if you work backwards, you're in the same time frame.
Yeah.
People get mad when they make an announcement. People get mad when they don't make an announcement. So, I mean, whatever. Just stay mad. That's what it is. They can't play anytime soon, and we know this. So, another bit of news from our friends in Scotland, Daily Record Sport. Jarrett sent this our way. Ann Budge insists that Hearts should be saved from drop because they made substantial investments to try to avoid relegation. Well, I mean, if Atletico Madrid's going to get into the Champions League, if they don't even finish in a place that should get them into the Champions League, I guess it's a valid argument. Yeah, we tried not to get relegated, so you shouldn't relegate us.
We spent money to try not to get relegated. We still finished at the bottom of the table, so we shouldn't be relegated. I think is that a translation?
I mean, at this point, why not? They had a vote come in that they said they didn't get, and then they published it, and then they said, oh, yeah, you can change your vote. Go ahead. So, hey, I would try it too. Yeah, we tried not to get relegated, so you shouldn't relegate us. They tried to vote one way, and you didn't take it, and they voted a different way. So, hey, let's have it. And it won't happen, probably, unless they don't relegate anybody, which is also a possibility in some countries and in some leagues. And Scotland's got issues outside of this. There's probably a need to restructure the way their leagues are anyway. This has just accentuated it. If they decide not to finish the season, not relegating anybody wouldn't be the worst thing to do. But then you just have to do this restructuring project that I guess the D in Dundee FC is all for these days, and we'll see if it actually happens.
Yeah, and they're looking for a 14-team premiership, and it would be 14, 10, 10, and 10 to expand the number of teams.
12?
It's
it's 12.
I think it's 10,
it's 12.
and then is it
12?
Okay. So they're looking to expand by 2. And then they would expand the number of teams in the SPFL from 42 to 44.
So they'd have a couple of teams from the non-league come up, and they wouldn't relegate anybody out of the premiership. So, I don't like the structure of the season in Scotland anyway, because you play everybody 3 times, and then the top 6 in the final 5 rounds of the league play one another, and the bottom 6 play one another to play a 38-game season. It feels really convoluted. The big reason why it's like that is you want as many Celtic Rangers games as possible for TV. I get that, but there's got to be a better structure to it. And in this situation, not because Hearts spent money to try not to be relegated and they were still bad, just because of the circumstances, and especially if they don't finish the season, I would be for not relegating anybody. But then you've got to figure out your long-term structure along the way, too.
It appears that there's a discussion going on between Spurs and Amazon for Amazon to be the naming partner for Spurs Stadium.
Okay. They're already doing the partnership on the documentary.
Yep. So looking like the idea would be a £250 million naming rights deal, 10 years at $25 million a year.
Okay. Well, they got the money, I think.
So, we'll see where that goes. Emirates signed their deal with Arsenal back in 2012 at $30 million a year. So we'll see if this continues with the possibility of Amazon and Spurs at their new barn.
It makes sense. I mean, it would
No
be
doubt.
they don't have a naming rights person right now, right?
No, it is.
Yeah.
I think it's Spurs Stadium or Tottenham Stadium or something nebulous and generic.
So, yeah, I mean, money's money, and you need money to come in, and this would be revenue that you didn't have before. So it's, yes, that would make a lot of sense.
Yep. And there's a lot of thought where Newcastle is concerned that once the deal to transfer ownership goes through, that you have dueling thoughts, actually, that they could bring Rafa Benitez back to be manager. Or, if you believe Sam Allardyce has urged Newcastle to stick with Steve Bruce and not return to the negative football under Rafa Benitez once the takeover is complete. Yeah, I know.
What? Who said negative football was Rafa and not Steve Bruce?
I believe that would be Sam Allardyce.
Sam Allardyce is talking about negative football.
Uh-huh.
He should know.
Yeah,
what?
But, yeah.
What? Sam Allardyce? What?
Uh-huh.
Because I'm better than you, and you know it.
Big Sam probably wears a scarf.
No doubt. He's got to catch the crumbs somehow.
He was twirling a scarf when he said that nonsense.
Oh, that's just so bad. But there's also the discussion that Newcastle could take full advantage of a depressed transfer market and the financial situation in the European theater and make some big splashes in said transfer market when we come out the other side of COVID-19.
Well, if they get a bunch of money pumped into them, yes, that would make a lot of sense.
So, but yeah, I thought that irony, thy name is Big Sam, when saw that. Negative football, Rafa Benitez, right.
Yeah, seriously. All right, 4 minutes ago, BBC.com, Premier League clubs committed to completing season with no date set. Clubs were expected to debate a June 30 deadline to resume play, but instead discussed possible scheduling models. And this was at a meeting today. Premier League said, quote, "It remains our objective," unquote, to complete matches, but currently all dates are tentative. So it's understood some clubs expected to discuss the proposed June 30 deadline at Friday's meeting, but it was decided now was not the right time to do so. In common with other businesses and industries, the Premier League and our clubs are working through complex planning scenarios. We are actively engaging with stakeholders, including broadcast partners, and our aim is to ensure we are in a position to resume playing when it is safe to do so and with the full support of the government. The health and well-being of players, coaches, managers, club staff, and supporters are our priority, and the league will only restart when medical guidance allows. So they talked about scheduling models. It remains our objective to complete the 2019-20 season, but at this stage, all dates are tentative while the impact of COVID-19 develops. My guess is in the engagement with stakeholders, including broadcast partners, the broadcast partners said, "Yo, dog, where's our games?"
Mm-hmm.
You're going to call the season? Well, you're not going to keep your money.
You ain't getting your money.
Well, I think they got it. I think theirs is set up
giving it back.
Yeah, you're going to be giving money back, and that is a no right now. So you're going to finish the season sometime. And again, nobody can get on the same page with all of this, and it's just nonsense and nonsense and nonsense and nonsense. I'm waiting for the Premier League vote that ends up in a spam filter because it's got to happen at some point. Okay.
Yeah, it'll end up in the Norwich or Bournemouth spam filter.
Something like that. We're going to go to an interview here with Scott and Richard from Burnt Hickory Brewery in Kennesaw. I know it's a spot that a lot of Atlanta United 2 fans hit up before matches. So after that, we're going to come back with Mike Conti from 92.9 The Game, and we're also going to talk our Friday flashback question, the best managers in American soccer history. Tweet your suggestions to us on Twitter at SoccerDownHere. Welcome to another Soccer Down Here interview. We're trying to highlight local businesses who have a relationship with the soccer community in the Metro Atlanta area, but are also getting creative and finding ways to stay active right now during all of this that we're all waiting on a resolution for. Today, Burnt Hickory Brewery joins us. And guys, please introduce yourselves to the SDH listeners.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Scott Hedin. I'm the president, founder, brewmaster, janitor, daycare operator, you name it, here at Burnt Hickory Brewery. And I'm with Richard. Richard, tell them who we are.
My name's Richard Ferrara. I am the taproom manager, and I do outside sales for the brewery as well. I've been here for about 4.5 years.
Excellent. Scott, give us a background for people who might know Burnt Hickory. How did it get started? How long have you guys been active?
Well, we've opened officially, it's hard to say. I started brewing in my basement like in the mid-2000s, and I decided to go pro, and we opened as a nano brewery in 2012, so 8 years ago. I was like the 8th person since Prohibition in Georgia to get a brewer's license. And at one time, I was like either 5th or 6th brewery in the state. Again, we started as very small. I was self-financed. I sold like my record collection to help start the brewery. And I used the brew house I built myself in my basement as our actual brew house. And so we started brewing, and at the time we weren't even allowed to have a tap room in this state. So we'd have like monthly parties up here where people were getting, samples, and we'd have music, bands, food, and we'd have limited bottle releases. And then things started to get a little more popular with craft beer in this state. So we expanded, and we got like a grown-ups brewery. So that was in 2014, and we've been chugging along since then. The craft beer scene in Georgia has definitely grown, considering that, in 2012 I was one. It's arguable whether we're 5th or 6th. It's either one of those. But now there's like over 100, like 110 breweries in the state now.
Wow.
So it's definitely something that's been growing.
Yeah, it's definitely changed just in the times that I've been paying attention to this. Richard, since you've been around with Burnt Hickory, as you guys have had, a public location and started to draw people in, so has Atlanta United, been part of the Atlanta conversation from a sports perspective. How have you seen the soccer community and the beer community kind of cross over?
Well, first off, I like to say that I played soccer for 13 years, so I love everything about the sport. So, but what we do generally, anytime Atlanta United is playing, we have a couple TVs in here. We have a projector and 2 TVs, and sometimes we will have gatherings or parties up here, or if not, sometimes if we can't get it on the specific TV channel, then what we'll do is some people will come up, pregame here, have a couple of beers, and then they'll shoot down to the stadium before the game starts.
Have you seen? Have you guys seen, like, with soccer's rise, a definite change in maybe some of the people who are coming to these events with that soccer and beer crossover?
What I'm kind of seeing, which is kind of cool, is the fact that we actually have, here in Georgia, it's no joke that there's a lot of transplants here, and nobody really gets behind the local teams. Everybody goes, well, the Braves are local, but I'm from Baltimore, so I like the Orioles, or I like the White Sox because my family's from Chicago. But the one thing about Atlanta United is that no one else they don't have a soccer team from somewhere else. This is their soccer team. So you see this response, and when to watch Atlanta United go from pretty much being a sport that mainly when here in America was being played by 6th graders, all of a sudden becoming a legitimate professional sport here in the South, to see it actually and have them go and win the whole thing. That was amazing. I mean, that really is one of the great moments in Atlanta sports history, well, at least professional sports history. I mean, as you know, college football is huge down here, but do the Falcons or the Braves follow that? No, Atlanta United is. You see what I'm saying?
It's been exciting to see. I mean, I've had a lot of people tell me that, doing stuff on 92.9 and calling the games there, and then doing the Atlanta United 2 games. A lot of people are, have NFL teams from different parts of the country, have a baseball team from a different part of the country, but their connection to Atlanta is Atlanta United. That's what's made them feel like Atlanta's home to them. They didn't really have that before with other teams.
I mean, you meet people all the time. Like, Richard sitting next to me, he's a Giants fan. I feel sorry for him.
Hey.
Then I'm a Bears fan, so feel sorry for me.
Watch it.
But, And it's rough.
Well, I'm a Falcons fan, so we're all
Falcons.
suffering.
I think the Falcons are great, and I love the Braves. But to have a unique team that's specifically your team, you see people embracing Atlanta United like they would embrace, if you lived in Chicago, you would embrace the Bears, or if you lived in New York, you embrace the Giants. So that's great to see too. Plus soccer and beer and soccer, it goes back to English football. Where, back in, I had a girlfriend in the 80s. She was English, and she loved Tottenham Hotspurs or the Red Devils, and it was all about getting a pint. So there's always been a beer and football connection. I think that is part of, beer and football, soccer go hand in hand, I believe. So we see a lot of people that definitely like that stuff.
See, the other thing that I love about you guys, being a music head and loving alternative rock, local stuff, the Driving and Crying collaboration jumped out to me. How did that come together?
Again, I sold a lot of my record collection to help start the brewery. And a lot of my friends were in rock bands from the 80s and the 90s that were from other parts of the country. The same type of thing we're talking about sports. Like the Digits is one of our most popular beers. Our Blood Orange IPA is named after my friend's band, the Digits, who are from Chicago. So people kept saying, why don't you make a beer for a local Georgia band? And I was kind of like, okay, who can I get in touch with? And I through mutual friends, I knew Kevin Kinney and Tim Nielsen. So I reached out to them and, explained to Kevin who our mutual friends were. And he was like, that's cool. And he came up here, we talked. He realized that I was into music. I play guitar. I'd actually owned rare Driving and Crying records. Like I wasn't a Johnny-come-lately fan to their music. And he's like, yeah, let's go for it. And we made a 30th anniversary beer for them when they got into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. Then, as that moved on, I started talking again with him and with Tim, the bass player. Like, why don't we just make a beer, just for that band? I mean, because they're kind of like us, I think. We're a Georgia original. We've been around for a long time, just like Driving and Crying, and everybody may not know the name of our beer, Digits, or whatever beers that we make, but they know the beer. I'll say to people all the time, you ever heard the band Driving and Crying? They're going, maybe. And I say, the song Straight to Hell? They go, yeah, I love that. That's a song that I listened to in high school and college. And people have that connection. So I kind of see there's a connection between BHB and Driving and Crying, and the fact that we, again, Georgia originals that have been around for a long time, but still serve up or perform great music. The brand new Driving and Crying record actually is one of the better Driving and Crying records they've ever put out. And I'm not just saying that I have to make a beer for them, but I really do like it. Well, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's kind of that thing. And we're kind of seeing things now where, with beer, you got to keep it local. I mean, local's where it's at, because there's so many beers. Like, why am I going to drink a beer from California when I can get a beer that's made right down the street from me that's fresher and even better? So, that's kind of where everything's going, keeping it local. And again, Atlanta United is, a strong local presence. So
yeah, I think with soccer, with music, community is so key. And Richard, with your role, being the manager of the tap room, you're so used to having people come in and seeing people on a regular basis. How has your role changed during all this with the tap room closed?
I've gone to, as many other breweries in the state have gone to curbside only. So I'm here generally from 12 to 7 every day. Most of the time we used to be closed on Mondays, but now we're open 7 days a week from 12 to 7. And we're coming up with different specialty beers. Scott puts on his magic hat and makes all these specialty beers. And
that's not true. I really don't have a magic hat. Don't tell them about the magic hat.
Oh, sorry.
They find out about the magic hat, then everybody has it.
All right. Well, then Scott comes up with all these great different variants.
Elves come in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And then Scott and I sit down and create different ideas and different ways to try and get customers to come to the brewery, curbside. And I sit and I wait. And when customers come out, I ask them what they like. At that point, I bring them the beer. And then, of course, luckily we are in local businesses or local grocery stores like Publix and Kroger.
Yeah, so the liquor stores are considered essential, as you well know.
Yeah.
I completely agree with this.
So
Yes.
so we're still selling the cans, so we're okay. But here's a tap room. What we try to do is we have a strong local local following, and
Right.
some of the beers that we put on here, like our Reese's Cup Stout that was never packaged, we're packaging it now in small parts so people can come up here. So they can't come here and drink a pint. They can take home a pint, like a one bottle at a time if they had to. I mean,
Look,
it's
I'm down
really
in the
is
city,
Wild
but I
West.
saw this Reese's Cup Stout, and that might get me in the car for a little bit of a trip.
Well, it's called Wilford Brimley because, if you drink it, you'll get the diabetes. I know that's not funny, but I mean, it's okay. But anyway,
we need something to laugh about these days.
Totally. But they have this, but yeah, no, it's kind of the Wild West now. I think the whole world is changing. I think, professional sports. Richard was in here in the tap room watching WrestleMania, and I'm like, why is this so weird? And it's like there's no crowd. I would think for professional sports, it has to be kind of a weird thing now if they're going to go. I mean, have they talked about their season? Has Atlanta United talked about it?
Yeah, it's all still up in the air right now, but it's looking more and more likely that when games, whether it's Atlanta United or the Braves or even the Falcons maybe, it's going to be behind closed doors. So empty arena, empty stadium games.
Yeah.
See, I can't imagine that because players play off that,
It's tough.
they play off the feel of the crowd,
Hometown hype.
That's anything. So I don't know. I just I think it's gonna. This is a weird time that we're all gonna kind of look back on and say, hey, where were you when this happened? Because it's just been weird, and we really don't know what's going to happen. So when it comes to craft beer, you think about it. Good. Craft beer lives in restaurants and bars on tap. Those aren't open to us anymore. So how do we get out there and how do we get our beer in front of people and how do we keep making the sales? So that's how it is.
A lot of creativity.
One guy walking up right now. We're being interviewed on the radio, so hang on for a second, okay? Thanks. I'm always making the sale, Jason.
You have to. Well, let everybody know how they can buy from you guys right now.
So right now, you can come to the tap room. You can look on our social media and our homepage. Every day we update it to let you know the different variants that we're going to have available. Because people cannot come into the tap room and get beer, we're taking what we normally would put on tap and putting them into bottles. And then you can get us in a lot of the local liquor stores like Total Wine. And then, of course, you can get us in the Kroger's and the Publix.
Yeah, but if they want to make the venture up to Kennesaw, we're out here basically at the picnic table, keeping 6 feet away from everybody, and then you come up and tell us what beer you want, we'll bring it out to you. And and we see a decent crowd because that's one of the things is, everybody still wants beer. You can't download a beer yet, right?
This is true.
Maybe. I
I hope that doesn't happen.
We figure out how you download a beer. Come up with that idea, Jason, and we'll all be doing our own podcast about that.
I got to think about this one. I got to try to come up with a way to do this. We've got 3D printers now. I mean, can we somehow find a way? Oh, I'm not buying it.
No.
Please don't come up with that idea.
Yeah.
Don't leave people come out. But yeah, no, people are showing up. People still want beer. I mean, they do that study that says that during times of strife, the few things that still make money are alcohol and video games. So, so people still want to drink beer, and you can't download a beer. So we're here. A lot of breweries are just kind of coming up with stuff to stay alive. Well, not stay alive, obviously, but stay in business, I guess.
Yeah.
And to just keep the lights on. We're working with the loans from the SBA and stuff like that. So hopefully things will be getting back to normal here soon.
So the best way to follow you guys, BHB_brews on Instagram, right?
Yeah, and Twitter, and then Burnt Hickory Brewery on Facebook and burnthickorybrewery.com. We update the website all the time. We're updating our constant list, and to see where our beer is being poured or where you can buy it, you can go to the Burnt Hickory Brewery on the Untapped app. That's a great app.
Excellent.
For beers. Yeah. So you can look for us there, or just call up here and ask for Richard. He's up here watching WrestleMania or reruns of old Atlanta United games.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, once we get back to normal, we're definitely going to come up and do a Soccer Down Here live show with you guys. Whenever this is possible, we'll be there. We don't know when this is going to be, but we will be there.
No, it's so weird.
Yeah, I know we had originally planned for May. Obviously, that probably won't happen, but yeah, we are definitely looking forward to that.
We will figure it out as we go, just like everybody is right now. But you guys, thank you for the time so much. I will be blasting the stuff out. I'll be sharing your tweets and sharing the Instagram posts. And I got to make a trip this weekend up to get some of this Reese's Cup Stout.
Well, just come by, wear your special contamination suit too, okay?
Yeah, of course, definitely. I'll have like 5 masks on. I'll be good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, Soccer Down Here. Thanks again to the crew at Burnt Hickory in Kennesaw. I've shared their post on Instagram and my stories, basically their menu of what's available this weekend. As a small brewery, they're able to get pretty creative with their stuff. And as Richard and Scott both said, like right now they're kind of taking advantage of opportunities that normally wouldn't be there. You know, a lot of times they have stuff that's available just in the tap room. Well, you can't hang out in the tap room right now, but they're finding a way to make it available to you to take home. So we will be hanging out and doing a live SDH show at Burnt Hickory when we're able to. We'll just have to wait and see when that is. But John, with us not being able to do a brewery tour right now, we're doing our best to do a virtual one as we go.
Yep, since we can't be at the brewery to do the tour, we're going to tour the breweries and do it in this way. And I'll disclose the conversation that I had that I told you about when we were listening to the interview, that I was wandering around outside of Office HD, and the boss thought that was a tremendous idea, that we were catching up with the local breweries that we would be visiting otherwise. He thought it was a great idea just to keep everybody acquainted with one another and keep the conversations going and get all the information out there.
Well, we can't take credit for the good idea. It's the Flood Project, our friend Scott Flood, who has been putting together the brewery tour for us. And, you know, we had a lot of dates on the tour that are now going to have to be rescheduled. So this was a way, one, to keep up the relationships, but two, also, you know, breweries right now, and, you know, whether it's a Wild Heaven, whether it's a Monday Night, whether it's a Burnt Hickory, you know, all kinds of different sizes, and everybody's having to figure out how to operate in this, you know, currently strange world for a business, and especially a brewery. You know, beer and you know, a brewery and a tap rooms, which is fairly a new thing anyway, is all about bringing people together, and now you can't do that. So how do you keep going in this time if you're a brewery? And it's interesting to hear some of the different strategies and ideas that the breweries have. So we'll have more of those as we go. Our virtual brewery tour will continue before the real brewery tour resumes, when we're all able to do it.
And it will be a very, very busy time when we get to the other side of COVID-19.
Yep.
All right. Tafka came in late in hour number 1 and had a comment that was tied to the discussion that we were having for most of hour number 1, specifically kind of pulling from the Scotland example and promotion, relegation, and all of that in all the leagues overseas. And Tafka asks, is it not a reasonable approach to have only promotion for this season, meaning no one is relegated from 2020, and in 2021 you have super relegation to return all the leagues to their normal size? And Tafka was specifically talking about EPL, SPFL, etc.
You could, and I think the only reason you would is if you don't finish the season. I think it's going to be almost impossible to relegate teams if you don't finish the competition that would have affected their relegation. I'm just thinking about it from a legal perspective. I would immediately be filing a lawsuit if I don't get to finish the season out, and you don't know. I mean, it's like you can say, well, right now, well, you're in the place where you'd get relegated. Well, we didn't play the final 10 games. So you don't know what would happen in those 10 games. What if we won all 10?
See Hearts.
Well, no. It's not even about see hearts. I'm saying, like, you can't tell me that because we're in a place now, that's where we finish.
True.
I'm not even getting into individual situations. You can't do that. You know, when we would have arguments in the D&P committee for Georgia soccer, you can't. When a game would, certain things would happen in a match that were wrong. If trying to think of a good example here from a game. Somebody gets red carded incorrectly, not a judgment call, but gets like a second yellow in a case of mistaken identity, and a team protests it. So when that happens, you know, a player gets their first yellow, but the referee says it's the second yellow, and they're sent off. And the team who had that happen to them, probably, you're playing a man down, you can guess that they would have lost if they're going to protest it. So they file a protest, and they say, you sent off the wrong player. That is a referee mistake. It's not a judgment mistake. It is a clerical mistake, and this game has to be replayed. Or, and it would depend on different competitions, I think it came down to either the game was picked up when that happened, or it was replayed. You couldn't award a forfeit. You couldn't award an outcome because you didn't know what was going to happen. And that's the thing here. I mean, you can say, well, you're a bad team. You're in last place for a reason. Your team is bad. But you can't guarantee that they wouldn't win the remainder of their games.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you play them. So you can't relegate a team when you don't know how their season would have finished. If you want to promote a team off that, it's a different conversation. If a team misses out on promotion because of a narrow spot, then yeah, I would be calling up Gary Martin Hayes. But the relegation part is even more punitive. I don't think you can realistically do anything if you don't finish the season out. I think you're creating issues no matter what you do. But yeah, I'm with Hofka. If you're going to do it, you are going to be better served to not relegate anybody, have a different kind of competition format for next season before you relegate teams to get back to the size of the league you want. You're going to have to do it that way. I still don't think you avoid all of the issues, because if a team misses out on promotion by a narrow amount, like a game in hand or whatever, then you're still going to have issues. But at least it's a different kind of issue than relegating a team that could doom them financially in these current times.
Well, I mean, think about the example of Leicester City a handful of years ago, and how below the relegation bar they were with Nigel Pearson. Then you make the managerial change, you're at the bottom of the table at Christmas, you make the Great Escape, and you're saved. If for some reason, if you take that season as an example, you know, if you cut off the matches, say, at Christmas, and you don't play the rest, then Leicester City would have been relegated in that particular example. So if you're not playing games, you're not coming up with absolutes, and you don't have the answers, really, that would be true to the table by the end of things.
All right, we're going to get into the Friday flashback question, and
All
it's
right.
perfect timing for Mike Conti to join us right now. What's up, Mike?
I'm trying this a little differently today over my computer. Do I sound goofy or do I sound okay?
You sound like the voice of God.
Oh, wow. Well, that might not be a good thing. Do you want me to disconnect it?
Holy cow!
It sounded like Harry Carey coming in.
I'll tell you what. Why don't I disconnect and we'll redo it on the phone? It'll probably sound better.
Okay. That was funny. That was worse than you sometimes, John.
Came storming in this morning.
All right, let's try to get Mike back on now. Hold on.
Mike Conti comes in like a house of fire.
Seriously, I like it. Oh, we're all losing our minds.
Goodness, well, no, I don't. Well, I never had one. At least that's what people tell me. So for me, it's
Yeah, that could be accurate.
yeah. But yeah, pretty close. But wow, that was strong. I give Mike full credit for coming in the authority that he was coming in with this morning.
Yes, that was definitely with authority. We'll see if his phone cooperates here in a bit.
With authority, Mike Conti.
Yeah, not bad. Who was that?
Supposed to be Marv Albert.
Okay, yeah, that second part was better.
Yes,
that was good.
Yeah, it's limited words and sentences you can get away with doing Marv Albert, but you can't do a full 30 or 45-second build. It's got to be in those short bursts if you want to have something done when it comes to a voice change.
It would be a tough one.
Reggie Miller from 23. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
You can't do full possessions and things like that if you're trying to do an impression of somebody.
I would have liked to have heard Marv Albert do Soccer Game. That could have been fun. All right. Let's see if he is normal Mike Conti or boisterous Mike Conti.
How is it now?
There we go. That's the
okay.
Mike.
So Jason put a question to the floor, Mike, as you were tuning back in. He would have loved to have heard Marv Albert call soccer.
Okay.
How do you think that would have gone off?
Probably better than Charlie Jones. Now, Marv is interesting, and he's someone obviously I've studied a lot. Marv is very, very deliberate, and I don't know if his cadence could necessarily match the pace of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
Whereas, but then again, I mean, Marv Albert did hockey, did New York Rangers for a long time, and yeah, so maybe I don't know. I mean, I still think the Gus Johnson thing could have worked if he had been paired with a better partner. So, I mean, Marv, I think with the right partner, probably would have worked out okay.
Because there was a difference for me in hearing Gus with Winalda than Gus with Warren Barton.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, Gus with Eric was really good.
Yeah, Gus and Eric would have been a really good pairing for the national team. I'm not sure if Gus and Eric would have sounded quite right on a Liverpool-Real Madrid Champions League match, but for the national team, yeah, I think they would have sounded great. I'm glad that Fox has kind of flipped the script a little bit on what ESPN did, where ESPN just for a time had an absolute aversion to having anyone with an American-sounding voice call soccer.
But you remember why. They had the 2006 World Cup
and they
with
used
Dave
O'Brien,
and everybody had backlash against it, which I thought was a little unfair.
It was unfair. He was okay, but he was new to the game, and his first assignment was the World Cup. That's a mistake.
That was tough for him, but it didn't mean that every American announcer shouldn't be on their network. That was the
well, I mean, if you look at ESPN's history of doing it, Roger Twibell in 1994, I thought, did a very competent job. JP was involved. Bob Lee in 94 and 98.
Bob Lee is somebody
underrated.
That I think everybody thinks about from SportsCenter or outside the lines. His play-by-play is great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He had experience. I think he did Tampa Bay Rowdies games or something like
Cosmos,
that back in the or Cosmos, yeah. So he had some experience. JP is a Hall of Fame soccer announcer with an American-sounding voice. We've talked about Joe Totino and the great job that there are a lot of announcers in MLS. They all do really, really competent jobs, and they're not British. And that's not to say that it's wrong to have a British-sounding voice, but I'm glad that Fox has kind of flipped that script that, well, it's not credible if it doesn't sound British. I think in different parts of the globe, you have different styles that work. The Latin style is very different than the British style. The American style is very different from the Latin style. It all depends on the announcer's personality. Going back to Marv, I don't know what his goal call would sound like because you don't really hear Marv get very, very excited. I mean, the moments when he does, it's like, wow, Marv Albert really kind of got up for that.
I think it would be a quick call and he would lay out.
Probably. And that's fine. That's probably what I should do. So I mean that's totally fine.
No.
So yeah, I mean, look, I think the other thing to consider is, a guy like Marv, when you have someone with that level of gravitas and credibility calling our sport, it makes a big event sound bigger.
Yeah.
So, in '94, I remember when ABC was doing the World Cup, Roger Twibell did a great job, but I was really hoping they would have used Brent Musburger or Jim McKay or Keith Jackson.
Brent
just to give it
Musburger would be fascinating on soccer.
Oh, he'd be rolling over every single prop the entire match.
No, of course he would. We know that.
Well, but now remember, Musburger hosted the World Cup in 1998 on ABC.
Yeah.
He hosted the World Cup in 2006 on ABC. And he did fine. I mean, he called Alan Shearer, Andy Shearer a few times in 1998, but whatever.
Yeah, that happens.
But no, I mean, I was really hoping, and the same could be said for '98 and 2002, when the sport was really trying to grow in the United States. Jack Edwards is someone who I think was very, very underappreciated for the job he did in 2002 with Tai Keogh.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people kind of panned him. And it was weird because you had soccer purists who didn't like him because they felt that Jack Edwards wasn't soccerish enough. And then you had casuals who thought, is Jack Edwards the best we can put on a World Cup? I actually thought he did a really good job. Jack's a hockey announcer. He understands the value of a goal. So I don't know how it got from Marv Albert to Jack Edwards, other than to say if a guy like Marv Albert could get into calling soccer, I think it would do a lot to help grow the game in this country.
So here's my question for both of you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want both of you to tell me the American sports announcer that you would most have liked, and it could be somebody who is not with us anymore, but somebody you would have loved to have heard call soccer matches in the United States.
Oh,
Mike Emmerich.
Yeah.
Mike Emmerich.
Yeah,
I can see
that one.
Yeah, again, just because he knows the value of the goal, he knows the mechanics of the build-up. The guy prepares like none other. I mean, his preparation is just amazing. He's accustomed to bizarre pronunciations through the game of hockey. So Mike Emmerich. I think, is as good as it gets for a sporting announcer in this country. I think he's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea.
What about you, John?
See, for me, since Mike took Doc Emmerich, I mean, now I'm thinking about it from a couple of different ways. Do you go Hall of Famer? As growing up, what would it have been like to hear somebody like Munson call soccer?
That could have been amazing.
Wow. Munson's in a class by himself. And honestly, to that point, and hear me out on this, I know it sounds crazy. If you could ever get Jim Ross behind the microphone of a good soccer match, or Tony Schiavone, that could be a lot of fun too.
But tell me this about Munson. How different was Munson versus Ray Hudson calling games?
Not that much.
No, they both will go crazy with crazy descriptors and phrases that stick in your head. Like, the two of them, pretty similar.
Yeah. Munson would probably be a little more negative.
Yes.
The one thing I really appreciated about Munson was he would call out Georgia when they were having a bad day. I really did a lot, and that's unheard of now because announcers are so insecure about their jobs and trying to make everyone happy. Munson would give you the full story.
He was somehow a homer, but a big critic as well.
Well, sometimes I think the biggest fans out there are the most critical of their own team, right?
Yeah.
Because we just care about it so much, which is something I really like about Munson. Ray, I've never really heard Ray get that negative. That would be the only difference I could think of. But other than that, I'm with you, Jason. I mean, there really is not that much of a difference.
I'll tell you somebody currently that I think he's got the right style to do really well on soccer play-by-play. He's one of my favorites in any sport right now, Kevin Harlan.
Yes.
Great call.
I think Kevin would do really well on soccer play-by-play.
I mean, if you listen to Kevin on radio as he does Monday Night Football and how he covers it, I mean, he covers the entire landscape on radio. And then when he does TV for CBS, you hear what the passion that Kevin has, but he lets the pictures tell the story. And so he could handle it both in a radio sense and a television sense. And say you have a guy like Kevin Harlan on decision day in MLS, and take the Kevin Harlan that we saw last NFL season where you have the playoffs being decided and he's got the game in front of him in Kansas City and then the other games that he's monitoring at the same time, and the legendary notification that Kevin says, "I'm calling both games." And you have that kind of awareness from a guy like Kevin Harlan on a decision day. I would revel in something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's fantastic. I'm totally with you, and he is someone who would give you a lot on a goal call. That is a great call too.
I'd love to see how he tackled that. I don't know what his approach would be, but I'm sure the passion would be there and it'd be fun.
Could you imagine the humanity behind that check?
With no regard for human life.
He just puts it top corner where Mama hides the cookies. You know, just stuff like that.
That's Mike Lang. That's
that's
a weird Pittsburgh Penguins announcer.
Yes.
But he would probably be pretty good too.
Oh yeah.
I think hockey announcers in general translate very well to soccer because it's the movements are the same. The outcome is basically the same. Everyone's trying to score a goal, and you have a team that's trying to prevent a goal from being scored. So the fundamentals of it are very much the same.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you think about it, you've got Mike Lang, John Forsland, Pete Weber, Pat Foley, Sam Rosen. Yeah. I mean, if you think a little bit further back, a guy who recently retired, Bob Miller out in Los Angeles, Randy Hahn. I mean, all of those hockey guys, I think, could have a great handle.
I think Randy Hahn's done soccer, actually.
Yeah, and when the Philadelphia Atoms were playing, Gene Hart, who was the Philadelphia Flyers announcer, did their games with Walter Barr. Absolutely, there are many, many parallels. What's interesting is you have a couple guys who work in the NBA who are doing soccer right now. You have Mark Followill in Dallas, who's phenomenal. Dave Johnson, who does the Wizards and DC United. Pete Pranica is doing the Memphis Grizzlies and the Memphis USL team. Again, kind of the same thing. It's nonstop action in the effort to score a goal. So that to your point about Kevin Harlan, that basketball skill set would probably translate as well.
Is what I thought of with Harlan doing soccer.
Yeah.
And Randy Hahn actually did call the final of the FIFA Women's World Cup. I think he did some TNT stuff, but he didn't get the big games. He did the Women's World Cup for Sports Channel America with Rick Davis. So the highlights
when it was the M&M's Cup, right?
Yeah, the first women's soccer championship for the M&M's Cup. It was some ridiculously long, stupid name because FIFA was still stupid at that time.
Right.
Oh, wow. So that was your broadcaster's discussion for Friday. Right?
Yeah, good times.
I hope everyone else found that as interesting as we did.
Maybe, possibly. We're at this point where it's just chaos. Our Friday flashback question, and this is where we were going to start, but we got sidetracked. It's all good.
Yes!
Favorite soccer, or best, let's go best. Best coaches in American soccer history. It can be national team, it can be NASL, it can be MLS, across the board. My first on the table, and it's because of both national team and MLS.
It's got to be Bruce Arena.
Yeah,
has to be. Yeah. This is one of those topics where there really can be no debate. When it comes
the best, I think it's Bruce.
I agree, and it's just as you said. It's national team. It's being an architect in MLS. It's success he had at the collegiate level as well. At the University of Virginia. To me, he is the OG of American soccer coaches. And I said that during the playoffs last year when Atlanta United drew New England. To me, the conversation has to start with Bruce Arena. That's not to demean Bob Bradley. I think he would absolutely be in this discussion for right below Bruce.
Yep.
It's not to demean Siggy Schmidt. It's not to demean Steve Sampson. It's not to demean Dave Sarakin I mean, heck, you could go up and down. There are a lot of American-born coaches that have had varying degrees of success. But to me, it absolutely has to start with Bruce Arena, who took the national team to its highest of highs in 2002, but also managed a successfully got the USA in the World Cup twice, which counts for something as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And the success at the league level and being one of the earliest coaches to succeed at MLS, I think is very, very important as well.
And he won in two different eras. I mean, he won the first two titles with DC, but then he did 3 and 4 years with the Galaxy, 2011 to 14. Bruce is the number one. There are 4 coaches who have won 2 MLS Cups. And this is where you start figuring out, all right, who's next. 4 guys have won 2. Brian Schmetzer has won 2 recently. And he's been to 3 finals in 4 years. He also had second division titles with the Sounders before they went to MLS. Siggy Schmidt, he has 2. He also had 5 Open Cups, I believe, with the Sounders, so that factors in. The other 2, I think, are not in this conversation enough. Maybe it's because of a little bit of when they won 2 MLS Cups. Dominic Kinnear won back-to-back with the Dynamo, 2006 and 7, and Frank Yallop won 2 and 3 years with the Earthquakes, 2001 and 2003. You know, that's the only guys who have won more than 1 MLS Cup. I think that counts in at least getting into the conversation.
It absolutely does. Yeah, no, it absolutely does. No question about it. Caleb Porter's name is probably going to come up at some point, if not yet.
He's got 1 cup to his name.
But also success collegiately, correct?
Yeah, and that factors in. I think Bruce's collegiate success is maybe a little more meaningful because of just where the stature of the college game was at that point versus the pro game.
Fred likes Caleb Porter.
What's that?
Fred likes Caleb Porter.
That's actually
that's
not
Gwen.
Fred.
That's Gwen.
Yeah,
Gwen's a big Caleb Porter fan.
Fred's at my feet right now and is actually being quiet.
Okay, so Gwen likes Caleb Porter then.
Yeah, Gwen likes the 4-3-3 style. Gwen was a big Akron fan, so. Yeah.
I think Akron's mascot, the Zip, is actually a greyhound, is it not?
Is it a greyhound?
I believe you're correct.
Is it a greyhound or a kangaroo?
Oh, the kangaroo, that's right.
Kangaroo, yeah.
Yeah, it's a kangaroo.
Never mind.
I think the kangaroo was named Zippy or something.
I was about to say, how do you get zips and kangaroos?
How do you get kangaroos in Northwest Ohio?
True.
True as well. It's about like plastic flamingos for a team in Wisconsin.
Oh, yep. But that's an inside joke to Madison, Wisconsin.
Well, maybe there was an inside joke with a kangaroo in Ohio.
That could very well be.
I have no idea.
But, Mike, you're talking about the ones that we brought to the floor so far. The one that we haven't brought up so far is Greg Vanney.
Oh,
with
great
what
call.
he did at Toronto.
Yes.
Got a treble. Only one with a treble.
Yeah. And has sustained that level of success in Toronto. I will be 1,000,000% honest with you. I did not know Greg Vanney was American. I thought he was Canadian-born. So there you go.
A U.S. national team guy as well.
Yeah. Well, then there you go. He absolutely would have to be in that discussion. Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to go old school here, and this doesn't happen. They can be, because Frank Yallop's a Canadian, but he did his work here in the United States with San Jose. So just managers who have been here. Going back to the old NASL days. Eddie Firmani won 3 titles in 4 years, which has been a little bit of kind of a benchmark of winning a bunch in a row. Now, 2 of them were with the Cosmos when they were spending $10 million a year and everybody else was spending $1 million. But anyway, he won 1 with Tampa Bay before he went to the Cosmos. He's got to be in that mix. And he went on and did manage an MLS in the first year, a little bit for the Metro Stars, bounced around the NASL quite a bit, but in that era, he's one of the top guys.
No doubt. It's, when you mentioned Eddie Fermani, the first thing that literally popped into my head was his time with the Cosmos. And yes, with what they brought in when it came to their talent pool, but still to be able to manage all of that different talent, get them to the last game of the year and get the win. That was a good pull with Fermani. Yeah.
I think I'm looking at it now. He is one of two managers who won more than one title in the NASL. Willie Roy, who is an American, played in the league and then managed in the league. He won 2 of the last 4 with the Chicago Sting. So that's it on the NASL side. So you're not even finding a lot to go back to then to compare to what's now. Let's talk national team success. And we had a suggestion on the timeline for 2 different ones on the women's side. Jill Ellis, obviously, winning back-to-back World Cup.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Tony DeCicco, who won a gold medal and a World Cup in his cycle. I think both of them have to be considered in this conversation.
No question. Mike, you look at Jill Ellis and everything that she has built in the time over the last handful of years, but then you have to include DeCicco with what happened at the early stages of women's soccer on the international stage.
Yeah.
So both of them are there.
I mean, Tony DeCicco is probably a little bit more on the architecture side. Jill Ellis is more on the tactical side of taking something that had been well established and making it better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's kind of 2 different levels of achievement, and both I think are equally significant, and both kind of stand on their own. Tony DeCicco, the '96 Olympics, that was a really, really, really big deal. Much, much bigger than the 1990 M&M's Cup / World Cup, whatever. And ironically, it had the same level of television coverage in this country. But that's what paved the way for '99 to be as big as it was. Absolutely, Tony. I mean, there I think it's a little closer than Bruce Arena and whoever you'd have number 2 on the men's side. I think Jill Ellis and Tony DeCicco obviously go, side by side, absolutely side by side. Plus, DeCicco's wasn't he a very accomplished collegiate coach at North Carolina? Am I remembering that correctly?
No, you're thinking Anson Dorrance.
I was going to mention
Anson
Dorrance.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it was Sharif Solomon on Twitter with the Ellis and DeCicco references, and Jill Robbins brought up Anson Dorrance, who...
Yes.
Anson, I need to double-check because I've lost count of how many NCAA titles he's had at North Carolina. It's a boatload. He coached the men as well. He's got a World Cup title. How many championships? 21? Jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. Like
now,
82,
not
83,
a lot of
84,
schools
86,
sponsored
87.
soccer.
Yeah.
Not a lot of schools sponsored women's soccer for a very long time.
Right.
So that's not to diminish his accomplishment, but
6 since 2000.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there you go. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's John Wooden like. That's beyond John Wooden. What he did collegiately, and then think of the players that he coached collegiately as well. Some of the biggest names in U.S. soccer history played for him collegiately.
I mean, you think about Anson Dorrance, 7-time National Coach of the Year, 21 NCAA Division I tournament championships, 22-5 as the coach of the women's national team, a .907 winning percentage in collegiate soccer, and obviously National Soccer Hall of Fame in 2008, but just stunning numbers when you look at what Anson Dorrance has put on the table. So for me, he's no doubt. And so, I mean, we were looking at Jason and I on our Twitch discussion last night when we did SDH PM. Mike, we did it specifically toward MLS, but then looking at it this morning, you have all of these different avenues that you can take and figure out, okay, best coaches and that kind of stuff. And I think it speaks to the development of the sport over the last couple of decades, where all you have to do is go down one aisle of the grocery store and you come up with a bunch of great answers.
No doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think it's a little bit underappreciated. And it might be because a lot of American-born managers have not had success in other parts of the globe, but even that is not 100% true. Bob Bradley had a lot of success with Egypt, did he not?
Nearly got them to a World Cup, and if you hadn't had the Egyptian league shut down and a lot of players not really having anywhere to play, he more than likely could have gotten them in.
And I mean, with what he did in other countries and things like that, in getting teams promoted into the cusp of places where they hadn't been before. I mean, Bradley was
Ligue 1 in France, having a lot of success with Stabæk. So Bradley's a tough one to judge because we've talked about MLS Cups and college and national team. Bruce Arena set the high bar. Anson Dorrance on the college side, but he's also got a World Cup to his name on the women's side. The legacy, that's a high bar. Then you're getting into, Siggy and Dominic Kinnear and now Brian Schmetzer with a lot of MLS success. Another one that I think needs to be in this conversation is Bob Gansler. Bob Gansler qualified the national team for the World Cup for the first time in 40 years in 1990. He got the U20 team to the semifinals of the U20 World Cup in 1989. And he's got an MLS Cup with Kansas City in 2000. Bob Gansler doesn't get talked about in this conversation, but those are things that are hard to argue with.
Yeah, and he got the U.S. into a World Cup when the U.S. didn't have a league.
Yeah, I mean, you had a bunch of college kids, and he went down to Trinidad and won the game that had to be won. And when you want to talk about importance of a match, that game had so much more on it than just qualifying. I mean, there was talk that if the U.S. didn't qualify, they might try to pull the World Cup and move it somewhere else because the U.S. wasn't good enough to host a World Cup on the field. So that game had a lot riding on it, and Gansler was able to get it done. But what I think, for me, what's most impressive is he had that success, the best of anybody in the United States in modern times. But then he went into MLS, and he won a championship there as well. So he was able to take it and adapt. He had the college success, he had the national team success, and then in a little bit different era, he won an MLS Cup in 2000.
So
Great call. Great shout.
Can we do the Gansler game in Trinidad as a watch-along? Put it on a list?
Yeah, it's on the list for sure, because there is the ESPN broadcast of that with JP and Seamus Mallon, I believe, on the call.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
And that's a fun one to watch back.
Yeah, so that'll be on the list of the watch-alongs. But no, this was a discussion, Mike, that we got into last night, and it has definitely gone in a bunch of different directions to talk about the depth of the game here.
No, it's a good one. It's a deeper situation than I think a lot of people, even within our own country, give it credit for. So it's a great discussion. And like I've been saying, hopefully we won't have to have these types of discussions much longer. We can start talking about actual matches. But I have no idea when that's going to occur.
All right, before we finish with you, Mike, we kind of know it's at least a working list of this, the best managers in U.S. soccer history. People in MLS right now, maybe some of the guys who aren't there yet, but you think could be, who impresses you could have that kind of career ahead of them?
American-born?
No, just working in MLS. Who's going to be here for a while, you would think, that would be in this conversation down the road?
Ooh. Boy. That's a really, really good question.
I think Porter is one for sure.
Tab Ramos. I think
Tab's a good call.
Tab Ramos is going to do great at Houston, or somewhere else.
Right.
I think he's going to have a very, very good managerial career, and he's proven that already with what he did with the youth teams at the international level. So Tab Ramos, now that is an American-born coach.
What about Vermes?
See, the thing is, Verme, he's been around for a while, right?
He's got an MLS Cup. He's got Open Cups. I mean, I think he's just outside of the Arena, Dorrance, Ellis, DeChico, Gansler, Siggy. I'll put Siggy ahead of the other guys who have won 2 MLS Cups. Like, I think Vermes is in that next group with Dominic Kinnear, Frank Yallop, Schmetzer. He's in that group, but could separate himself from it. I mean, he's nowhere near done.
Yeah. And then 2 non-American-born MLS managers who I think could potentially have a lot of success in this league. And I don't know if they'll stay in the league, but I think they'll have a lot of success. Schelotto at LA Galaxy. And you know, Savarese up at Portland, and that's a team that their core is aging. I don't know how much is left in the current window with the group that they have. But if Gio if he hangs out in Portland or if he ends up with another MLS club, I think he's an outstanding manager. And I'll add Matias Almeida to this as well, another outstanding manager. I don't know how long he'll be in the league, but I think he's phenomenal. I think he did a phenomenal job. It really should have gotten more consideration. Jim Curtin. Jim Curtin's another name, by the way, an American-born coach that we don't really appreciate a lot.
I like that.
He's been around a while, but Jim Curtin is another name that I think deserves more credit. He did a phenomenal job with Philadelphia this past year.
I don't think Schelotto and Almeida and Frank de Boer will stay in the league long enough to get into this conversation. I think they'll have a great run in the league, but they'll probably go elsewhere. I think out of guys who are in the league that have the potential to work their way into this conversation, Gio is at the top of the list for me, but it's going to depend on either how Portland rebuilds, how patient they are with him, if they rebuild with him, or where he goes next. I think he has the ability to be in this, but is he going to be in the right jobs to be in this? Because, you see it in every sport. A great coach, a great manager sometimes doesn't get the credit they deserve because of where they are. They might be at a smaller program, they might be at a smaller team, and they punch way above their weight, but they're not going to win a championship. I worry about that for Jim Curtin, too, because Curtin, with his work at Philadelphia over the last few years, has really impressed me. I think he's one of the best young managers coming up in the league.
Yeah, agreed.
Right there with
Absolutely agreed.
Just think what he could do with more resources.
Yeah, well, but that's also it can go either way, because you see that sometimes where a manager or a coach takes that job that's a bigger job for them, but it's not the right fit for them.
True.
Sometimes guys are sometimes guys are better assistants than they are head coaches, or they're better as the number 2, not the number 1. Some managers thrive in that underdog scenario, and they don't work as well with a top team.
Yeah. So, no, I'm right there with you with Jim Curtin. Good stuff.
All right, Mike, we got a big game on the radio tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, exciting. So, MLS Cup Final from 2018. You all know what happened. You all know what it was like. Now we're going to replay it on the radio for the first time since that night. So that's 5 o'clock on Saturday, and hopefully you'll join along. It was really, really fun to kind of do this 2018 flashback over the last 3 weeks on the radio, and this will kind of culminate it, and then maybe we can put some pressure on our bosses to do the 2019 season.
Best rear naked choke I ever got.
Yeah, that's right. The first person I kind of locked eyes with when it was over was actually Jarrett Smith, who was in the booth, and he was crying. And I still vividly remember that part of all of it. It was very, very, very special. We were all lucky to be there and have a chance to describe it. So hopefully on Saturday it sounds as good as it sounded, or it sounds as good as it felt that night in December of 2018.
So I know I'll be tweeting along. I'm going to listen. I have never listened to that broadcast in its entirety. I've listened to bits and pieces of it.
Too.
More than most, obviously, but I've never listened to it in its entirety. I'll be tweeting along for sure.
Me too. Me too. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm with you. I've only heard bits and pieces. I haven't heard the whole thing. So, in fact, I don't know how Steve produced it, and if he kept everything in there, if he took some stuff out. So I guess we'll find out. But, yeah, we'll be tweeting along on Saturday, and hopefully it'll be a fun thing to listen to as you go about your days on Saturday afternoon.
All right, and for people who are making their predictions on the tailgate at home today, you going to give them a hint on what you're doing?
Well, yeah, it's something that you wouldn't think could be done on a grill because it involves a little bit of baking. But it is something that can be done on the grill, and it's a multi-step thing. It's a little bit tricky. It's something I have not tried on the grill before, so we'll see how it works out.
I'm intrigued because it started yesterday, right?
It did, yeah. It's weird. You gotta put a sear on the meat and then get it chilling again. So you'll see. I'm going to try not to give it away, but
okay.
Hopefully it'll turn out okay. I've never tried this on the grill before.
And that'll all be going on both on the air from 2 to 7 with Dukes and Bell, but also on Mike Conti 929 on Twitter.
That's right. And if you're playing along, send us your pictures as well. We would like that.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Have a good weekend.
Okay, guys.
We'll be tweeting at one another.
Sorry about the technical snafus this morning. Apologize about that.
It's good. All good, Mike.
You just terrified us when you came in, that's all.
See you guys.
Bye. See ya. All right, we've got a few more minutes before we wrap up on a Friday. So what have we learned so far? We've got a bunch of different coaches, and maybe we've got our trademarked by Matt Doyle tiers that we can work with here. I think there is a GOAT tier of one of Bruce Arena. I just, even with what happened in the last World Cup qualification cycle, I can't take away 5 MLS Cups. I can't take away an Inter-American Cup, the doubles he did with DC in the early days, and then also adapting to the newer MLS with LA Galaxy, and last year having success with the Revolution. And all of that combined with qualifying for 2 World Cups, getting to a World Cup quarterfinal, I think he's the GOAT. So the next tier for me would include Ellis, DeChico, Dorrance, Siggy Schmid.
Yeah.
It would include Bob Gansler for me.
Right.
And I will put Eddie Firmani in that one because of 3 titles in 4 years and doing it with the Rowdies and with the Cosmos.
Right.
Then the next tier would be Schmetzer, Kinnear, Yallop, Willie Roy, who all have multiple First Division championships.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put Peter Vermes in that already.
Okay.
Because of the Open Cups to go along with his 1 MLS Cup.
Where's Bradley?
Bradley would be in that one for now. I think he's probably going to edge out of it pretty quickly. But he would be in that one for now. You could argue that he's in the maybe the bottom of the next tier. The top tier outside of Bruce. I could go with that. I could be persuaded for that.
All right.
He's right in between the two. So it just depends on where you put like the supporter shield that he did with LAFC and where you rank that team. If you think that's one of the best teams in MLS history, then you'd probably put him in that top tier behind Bruce. And he's got the potential. I think he's got the ability to get into that conversation with Bruce. I think he has the potential as a manager to be there. Just depends on how long he wants to do it and how much success he has.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you another one who, for me, is in that next tier, and you could, I think, also make the argument that they should be in the top tier behind Bruce, is Paul Riley.
Yes.
What Riley's done in the NWSL is unprecedented in a professional women's environment. The winning he has had, and the domination he has had, and the quality that his teams have played with, I think he's definitely in the second tier. Bruce is in a tier by himself, so it's Bruce, then it's first tier, then it's second tier. Riley, no question, in the second tier. I could put him in the first tier.
Yeah. No disagreement for me on any of this.
Okay, that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, Bora just did the national team for a World Cup cycle, so it's a little bit harder to judge. Steve Sampson's an interesting one because Sampson had a bad World Cup. He did qualify for them for the World Cup, the second coach to qualify the team for a World Cup, and it was a good qualification cycle. He got them to a semifinal in the Copa America in '95, and then after all of that, he did the double in MLS. He did a Open Cup and MLS Cup title in 2005. I'm good with putting Steve Sampson in the second tier because of the double, because of qualification for a World Cup. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm
yeah,
not
like I said,
100% there, but if he's in that tier, I'm not going to argue it and get upset about it.
Yeah, no, that's no. I'm good. I'm good so far. I am in step with you on your decisions.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't think there's another manager to put in the mix. Klinsmann would be one. He's kind of like Bora. It was just a World Cup cycle, and Klinsmann went further into the next cycle. They're a little bit harder to judge because they don't have the domestic success. Bora did do a little bit in MLS, but he didn't win anything. He was with the Metro Stars when they had 75 different managers in 3 seasons.
Right.
So I don't know if that really helps you. Klinsmann, you can't put him in the second tier for me. You can't put Bora in the second tier for me either. So
no.
They're on the outside looking in. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, I can't put anybody else on the women's national team side into the second tier. I don't think there's anybody else who gets there yet. April Heinrichs had a Olympic gold medal, did not have a World Cup. I just can't put her in the second tier.
Yeah, no, it's right. Yeah, so far I'm right there with you. I can't declassify anything that you have put out there and shuttle it around anywhere. But yeah, Vermes for me, when we were talking with Mike, was one that popped into my head.
All right, let me check this real quick. So we're getting beyond champions now, and we're looking at wins in MLS. And I want to see if there's anybody outside of the champions, or they won one title, but they've got an absurd amount of wins in league history and should be.
Where did we put Vanny?
Vanny would be in the second tier. Yeah, Vanny's one we didn't talk about in that second tier, but he would be in the second tier. Because
Caleb Porter's second tier?
Caleb. Vanny gets into the second tier because he did a treble, and nobody's done that outside of him. That's it. Porter has an MLS Cup. He's got some college success. Vanny's ahead of Porter for me. I don't know if Porter's in the second tier yet. I don't know if he goes into that second tier just yet.
Okay.
So regular season wins, who we have not talked about yet, because Siggy's got the most, Bruce is second, Kinnear is third, Yallop is fourth, Bradley is fifth, Steve Nicol would be next. Nicol does not have an MLS Cup, but he's got 4 MLS Cup appearances, which is a lot. It's substantial. Would he go into the second tier? Like, where would you rank Steve Nicol, Caleb Porter, Jason Kreis, who has an MLS Cup, who's got 103 wins, 7th in MLS history. Thomas Rongen, who has an MLS Cup. He's 9th in league history in wins with 82. How would you rank Nicol, Kreis, Porter, Rongen? Like, are all of them in the second tier? 'Cause I don't think I don't know if they get there. I don't know if they get there yet.
No.
I would actually lean to putting Steve Nicol in the second tier above any of them because of 4 MLS Cup appearances. I mean, you didn't win one, but you got there 4 times.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same conversation that you have in the NFL about Marv Levy.
Yeah.
With the Buffalo Bills.
Like, at some point, the amount of close calls have to, rank for something.
Yeah.
So I will put Nicol there. I will put Kreis in the second tier.
Okay.
And that one's a tough one. I'm not as convinced there. Actually, you know what? No.
Porter?
If we're gonna follow by my reasoning, no. It's Steve Nicol in the second tier, and that's it. Nobody else is there yet.
All right.
Porter's got work to do. Kreis has got work to do. I think Rongen is done as a manager. I don't think he did enough to get into the second tier of all-time coaches working in the United States. So Porter and Kreis, I think both have the potential to get into that second tier with success, but Nickel gets in there because of 4 MLS Cup appearances.
Yep, I'm down with that. That'll work.
All right. And Riley's in the second tier, and Riley could potentially be in the top tier. But Riley, Vermes are the ones who are kind of in between the first and second tier.
Okay. So they'd be like B pluses, where if you have Arena as the A, grading him out. Arena is your A grade.
Arena's in a class by himself.
Yeah, he's your A plus.
No, he's beyond the grading.
Okay.
A would be the first tier. B would be the second tier. Keep it simple.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, your A's and your B's, and so you've got some B pluses in there that could be A's by the time they're done.
Yeah. I'm actually good with going ahead and putting Riley in the A group. So let me make sure here and compare. And I know you can get into conversations about how hard is it to win NWSL versus MLS. I understand that, but he's got 3 NWSL titles and 3 straight shields. 2 straight doubles. That's hard to take away.
And if you also want to throw in that ICC
finals.
women's trophy as well.
Yeah, and that's it's a cherry on top.
But no, his work in the NWSL has been absolutely unparalleled.
Yeah, the ICC trophy doesn't change anything for me because it's not recognized as a official competition. So, I mean, you can still look at it as a set of friendlies. Riley gets into the A tier for me. So let me make sure I got this right. So Arena, step above everybody.
Right.
A tier, and I'm not putting them in order in the A tier.
No.
Riley, DeChico, Dorrance, Ellis.
Yeah.
And then Siggy. I don't think I'm going to put any of the next 3 guys who have won multiple MLS Cups there yet.
Right.
That's Kinnear, that's Yallop, that's Schmetzer. I think they're in the B.
Right.
I could... Oh, Gansler is in the A?
Yes.
That was the one. Fermani is in the A because of 3 NASL titles.
Right.
And I know there's guys who won a ton of like college titles in the 50s and stuff like that. That it's hard to quantify. I'm probably leaving them out. I could absolutely make a case and think about it and probably pull 1 or 2 of them in. Guys who were, outside of the professional era. Who wouldn't get into that conversation right now off the top of our heads. We'll leave that up for discussion later. But so that's our A, and then right in between, Vermes is right in between the 2. He's a tough one.
So Vermes is like a B plus.
Yeah, I'm fine if he's in the A. I can understand the argument if you don't want to put him there just yet. Because he's only got 1 MLS Cup, and there's others with 2 who are not ahead of him. But the longevity, the Open Cups, it's hard not to put him in the A for me, but I could go either way.
Yeah.
The B, Nickel, just because he doesn't have that MLS Cup, I think it's hard to put him in the A.
Yes.
Nickel, Kinnear, Yallop, Schmetzer. Bradley was the other tough one, who's A-B.
So
because
Bradley a B plus with Vermes?
Don't do a B plus. Just do he's one or the other, but it depends on who you're talking to. Like, we're not making a third class here.
No, but a B that is active that could be an A.
I would tend to put both of them at the bottom of the A. I think the more we talk through it, I would put Bradley in there too, because he's got, getting out of a group stage at the World Cup. He's got an MLS Cup. He's got the best season in MLS history from a supporter shield standpoint, and that does count for something. So, and his international success, which is not what you're judging him on here, but it can put him over the top in this conversation. So, Bradley, would be at the bottom of the A group. Vermes is at the bottom of the A group.
Mm-hmm.
Vanny's the one maybe that's at the top of the B for now, but could very easily be at the A quickly. Him and Schmetzer both. Because their success is very recent. Vanny's got the treble. Schmetzer's got 2 MLS Cups. Both of them have been to a boatload of MLS Cups in a short period of time. They're both right there at the top of the B.
Okay.
Willie Roy's in the B because he won his titles with Chicago Sting. Like at the end of the league's run, the Cosmos weren't as strong. It wasn't as big of a league. So that factors in. I think that's everybody.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's everybody that we've talked through. Kreis would have to win his way into the B, I think. I don't think he's there just yet.
And Porter would have to win his way into the B?
Porter would have to win his way into the B, yeah. I think those are fair. And Rongen is just outside the B. Like Dave Durr, who had 81 wins in MLS, but didn't win an MLS Cup. He's outside of the B. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
All right. So we've accomplished something this morning.
We have. A couple of other things from Taco before we go.
Okay.
He said, be sure to talk and mention about the Train with MLS website initiative. It's a great idea on so many levels: youth development, league exposure, pandemic community outreach. Just awesome.
Yeah, it's a new portal supposed to cover players of all ages, all abilities. It's a digital experience that's got hundreds of training videos from MLS clubs, and it's for coaches, it's for parents, it's for recreational players. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that is, one, it's needed right now, but two, it's needed in general, because I've mentioned this person for a while, Tom Byer, who the Houston Dynamo are working with now, and it's a good thing that he's involved in the United States because he's had great success in Japan, in Australia, worked in China for a while. And Byer is all about two different things that I really subscribe to. One is that everything starts at home. So for kids, as soon as they can have a ball at their feet, there are things that you can do to reinforce good skill development. But two, it's all about raising up the overall level of the game, raising the baseline level up to affect the game as a whole. Byer says that if you take the best players in a country, in a city, and whatever, to a degree, they're born that way, or they're born into an environment that is going to produce a better player. Those players are going to be good no matter what you do. Now, you can always make them better with good coaching, or they can, fade if they don't have good coaching. That's absolutely true. But they're going to be at the top of the ladder for reasons outside of your control. But if you make the ladder start at a higher level, one, you're going to have more competition, so that's going to make players better along the way, and maybe not directly affect the top player as much, but it's going to affect that B player and that C player because they're going to have more competition to get better. So if you raise the baseline, which is something you can do, I think easier, it's easier to take the, and we're going to compare it to grades because it's just an easy thing to understand. We'll take the D soccer player. It's easier to take the D to a C than it is to take the A to an A+. Make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
I think from a player perspective, it's a lot easier lower down the ladder to raise players A level. And if you do that and you have far more players at a C level, that's going to affect the B. That's going to affect the A. Maybe not as directly, but it will. It's better to spend the resources on raising the baseline than working with the smallest percentage of players. So something like this is going to affect that baseline. And it's not exactly some of the things that Tom Byer has done, but it's along those lines of all kinds of elements of things that you can do that have nothing to do with how much money you have to play at an expensive club, which as well does not guarantee that you're going to be a good player. It doesn't guarantee your kid's going to be a good player. Just because you can spend money to have them at a club doesn't mean it's the right club for them, doesn't mean it's the right coach, doesn't mean that they're going to all of a sudden be a better player than they would have been playing somewhere else. It honestly goes to the Landon Donovan argument, of Donovan wanted to be more comfortable to reach his goals. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying that as that was his personality. He was not somebody who would have thrived and met the level that he did if he had stayed in Germany. He might have washed out of the game in 5 years. You don't know. But he found the environment that suited him, and he reached his full potential. I think he did reach his full potential. I think it's crazy to say that he didn't. Some players are going to be better off in a different environment. Some players are going to be better off really getting challenged and having to almost suffer in a lot of way at a very competitive club. Others are going to be better being the big fish at a smaller club. Others are going to be, more, I think, reliant on the coaching relationship. They might have a coach that gets the best out of them, who might not be at that top club. There's no one blueprint. What something like this does is this gives every kid the opportunity to have more tools to be better. It's not about which club they're at. It's not about how much money they have to pay for registration fees or what kind of gear they have. It is, look, these are things you can do to be better. And if you want to put in the work and follow this, you'll be better. It's up to you. So this is great. And if this is part of what MLS is now thinking as they're going to do what used to be the Development Academy, what'll be whatever MLS calls it and whatever form it takes, and they put this kind of stuff alongside of it, this will have a huge effect on the level of the American soccer player. 100%. And this type of stuff, too. This is another one that it's not just boys specific. There's nothing saying that girls can't do these activities, too, that MLS is going to put out there. MLS, and we've talked about it before, it maybe would have been easier before this. MLS can really help the women's game in this country, and they're going to have to make a decision on, do they want to invest there? I think they probably would have pretty quickly if the coronavirus thing hadn't hit. And now, their core business is going to be affected. But NWSL is going to be affected too. I do think a partnership would be the best way to go, where it's not, a women's MLS, but it is the NWSL with more MLS involvement, whether it's partnership, whether it's, direct ownership, whether it's support, whatever it is. I think that relationship will be even more important going forward to pool resources. But these kinds of things, this is not gender specific. So this is great. And this is something that I love to see MLS taking this on, because I don't know of really anybody else doing it exactly in this way and in this kind of initiative in terms of other soccer leagues or other sports leagues in the United States. This is great, and I hope it's something that MLS continues to grow and do even more of.
Yep. And one final thing from Tafka this morning about his original idea over in Europe about promotion only and then having super relegation in 21. He says, if this thing gets drawn out into time frames, making it impossible to finish the 20 season, maybe it can be done and clubs can create a new competition in honor of the COVID crisis to give TV providers for free to make up for the lost matches.
See, but this is where if you're going to create another competition, you're going to create other games, just play the games that are scheduled in the competition you're in. For me, there's no reason why you don't finish the current season. It doesn't matter about the calendar anymore. I don't care. If the next season doesn't start until January, it doesn't start until January. And from the MLS side, and I've seen the questions, if MLS is committed, and I don't know what their TV contracts are, you're talking about less money, you're talking about different situations, and MLS is about to go into a negotiation period on the next partnership deals, so you probably have a little more leverage in figuring things out as well. Let's be real. It doesn't matter. If MLS wants to play a 34-game competition, they can do it. And if that means the next season is this season's gonna carry over past the end of 2020, then it carries over to the end of 2020. MLS is in a different situation because you played 2 games. You're not. If you scrap it and say we're going to do something different, you've played 2 games. I hope they don't. Obviously, Atlanta's got 2 wins. I don't want to see those washed away. But you've played 2. That's a different conversation than a league that has 9 games left or 8 games left and is in the tail end of their competition. I think you've got to finish it. So I see what Tafka's saying, but there's no point in adding games in between the current season and the next season. If you're going to cut the current season short, just play the current season out. The only way that would make sense to me is if you get into a situation where you try to play it out, you're unable to play it out because somebody gets sick, and you get into a stage where then you're going into quarantines, and then you're going to do that. Well, maybe if that happens, and then you make the decision, you know what, we have no idea how this is going to work, we are going to call this season, which I still don't think makes sense. It's the proper move, but in that case, at least I would see why that they tried something and they've decided, you know what, we're going to move on. If they're able to say, because let's follow the quarantine side. I know this is a very convoluted answer to this, but follow me for a second. Let's go back to the NBA example. The Jazz, when Rudy Gobert tested positive, that meant that immediately Oklahoma City, who was in the building with him that night, had to go into quarantine. Every team who had played the Jazz in the last 2 weeks had to go into quarantine. Now, that's really difficult in an NBA perspective because you're playing 3, 4, 5 games a week sometimes. It's not the same in a soccer perspective, but let's say a player for Arsenal tests positive, and whoever played Arsenal in the last 2, 3 times, and if you're playing multiple games in a week, maybe 4 or 5 times, those teams have to go into quarantine. So then that wrecks your schedule. Maybe, in this case, the teams that don't have to do that play some kind of alternate competition to fulfill dates for TV partners and find a way to work together. That would be the only way that I'd see it make sense. Otherwise, just play the season when you finish the season. Don't put a date on it and just play it out.
Sounds like that's a week, sir.
Yep. There's no telling what we'll do this weekend. We've got the radio broadcast tomorrow at 5, and I'll be tweeting along with that on my Twitter at Longshoe. We might hop on Twitch. We might get a crazy itch and hop on Twitch. Oh, man, I wish I'd had it pulled up. Let me try that again. Hold on. Oh, where is it? Man.
Reset your gag.
All right, so this weekend, we might get a crazy itch and hop on Twitch.
That was a seamless transition, sir.
Yes, that was good. All right, that's where we're at these days. We're going insane. So, might do that.
You're just scratching the surface on promoting our Twitch account.
It's true, but it's fun. It was a fun time last night talking to everybody who hung out with us. So, we'll be doing more of those. Twitch.tv/soccer down here. Please subscribe, and it'll let you know when we go live. We'll give you a heads up on our Twitters as well. But Atlanta United, I know we'll have a game streamed Saturday night. I don't know what game it is, so stay tuned to ATL UTD on social media for that schedule. Let's see. 2-Day NA's doing some cool stuff at 6 o'clock every day. I think it continues over the weekend. It's a 60-minute condensed version of classic MLS matches, and they've had some like older ones from the 90s, which have been cool. I hope they do more of the old school ones. I like those, but they've got all kinds of stuff popping up at 2-Day NA at 6 o'clock every day. So check their schedule, and I think that's all.
Yeah. New version of Spiked Up is available at Atlanta United FC, by the way.
Michael Vick hanging out.
Darren and Matt Moore and Michael Vick, who I think we've heard of.
Yes. So that's available. All kinds of stuff as we go. Thanks for following us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of the show. We'll have more content and shows and maybe even a new look on the website before the weekend is over. Who knows? We could get crazy.
Boom.
It might happen. Something like that. Thanks, y'all. Mucha plot, y'all.
Much plot.